Hi, my name is Michael Swallow, and I'd like to welcome you to this course on web development. First, why would you want to become a web developer? Well, numerous studies show that programming is one of the fastest growing jobs in the US. It is also one of the highest paying. In 2015, the national average salary for software developers was $101,000, more than double the US average. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates 17% growth over the next decade, which is faster than almost all the other fields. In fact, demand is so high that companies are having a hard time hiring enough programmers. The result is numerous companies like Udacity are trying to bridge that gap by training new programmers and getting them ready for the job market. So if you're looking for a fast-paced, high-earning, and exciting career field, web development is a great choice. You'll constantly face new challenges, new areas for professional growth, and plenty of rewarding specializations. Do you like to create art assets, pick specialized typography, and design engaging layouts? You'll find that front-end design can be a rewarding career path. Do you like working with data and creating meaningful relations between data sets? Then you might find yourself drawn towards becoming a data engineer. If you like working with people and seeing how they interact with technology, then becoming a user interface expert might be a fulfilling career path for you. And if you find them all equally fascinating, then maybe full stack engineer is the career path you'll want to pursue. There are some possible objections you may have from getting into this field, though. The first one is a concern about the amount of money it costs to start web development. Here, there's great news. The only cost is the cost of an internet connection and the cost of a computer. And you don't need to have a fancy computer either. Any computer that can browse the web has enough power to run a web page and support web development. Even better, you can make a web page and host it for absolutely free. I'm even going to show you how. The other objection is an objection about the amount of time this may take. And I'm not going to lie to you, there's going to be a time cost to learning any new skill. But the good news is that the time cost is negligible compared to how quickly you will progress. You will learn new skills, come across challenges, and then conquer those challenges. So you'll find the time costs are manageable, and the time will generally go by fast when you're solving an interesting problem. Compared to learning similar high-paying skills, the time cost is negligible. I became a full-time web developer in 2012 and landed my first job within 6 months. If I decided to become a lawyer or a doctor, that quick turnover would not have happened. Hello and welcome back. So to get started with the most basic thing you're going to need in order to become a web developer, we're going to get you set up with a cloud-hosted web development environment, and you can share the URL with anyone you wish to. And in fact, you can see right here, people are showing off their creations. And it's a great way to get a little bit of exposure. You might have to create a new account first. It will let you create a new pin without an account, but then it's not going to be tied to you. It's going to call you Captain Anonymous or some other name. So create your account and then click on New Pin. And as soon as you do that, you are going to be taken to this basic web development area. Mine's going to look a little bit different than yours, and that's because you have settings that you can change. You can also change them on your entire profile. So mine's set up like this because that's my preferred approach. Yours may be different. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some basic procedural code. And procedural code just means start at line 1, go to line 2, then line 3, then line 4, and work your way on down. That's how development has been done for a very long time, and it works great for small projects because it's easy to read. It's fairly easy to maintain when it's small, but it kind of causes problems as projects get larger, and I'll show you a bit of that. But first, I want to demo some basic elements. There are two basic display types in HTML. The first type is the inline type. So if I type in span and hit the tab key, you'll see that it auto-completes that tag, and then I type in some span. If I go now to the next type and I type in span again and I say some more span, you're going to see that everything is just smashed up against each other. If I create a block level element, which I'll do by typing in div.green, and if I hit tab here, you'll see that it automatically creates a class called green for me. And here I'm going to type in some green element. If I go right here and do the exact same thing, notice what's going to happen. These two elements are on their own lines, whereas these two are stacked up against each other. That's the default behavior. Now, my personal favorite form of display is what's known as inline block. So I'm going to go copy and paste code because I had already worked on this before. And we're going to step through it. And you can see here that what CSS is, HTML is just sort of the raw language of the web. And that's perfectly fine. I'll get rid of that. And then just to prettify this up, I'm going to put a little bit of space. So this is the raw backbone of the web. And as you saw here, it was just basic text, which is perfectly fine. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, so a lot of text involved on the web, but no styling, very boring to look at. And the only styling is the defaults that come with each browser, and they're all slightly different. So we want to be able to control that. And the display inline block says, behave like an inline element, so keep expanding until you hit a certain endpoint, which is set up by the padding here. So the size of this text plus the 100 pixels that we give, plus the margin, which is the spacing right here. So this is only 20 pixels. And if you want to test all that out, hit Command and / or Control /, and you'll see what happens as you turn on and off elements. Oops, not that, because that's going to be an error. But if I turn off my border radius, for example, you can see the corners snap up right here. I turned off my margin, and you saw how that caused it to sort of smash up against each other. Turn off the line height, and that turns off the spacing in between here. If I turn off my font size, then my fonts are going to lose their boldness or they're going to become smaller. So that's what CSS does. It gives that styling. And then finally, we have a class called green, which is represented by this dot here. And that just means that any element with a class of green, I want to apply this background color, which is teal, because I think teal's a little nicer than the default green that comes with the browser. That's not as pretty to me, so I'm going to go back to teal. So that's all well and good. And for the purpose of this demo, let's say that you're given the task of creating a bunch of cards like these. You'll see these on different websites where it's a little block card. Usually has someone's picture, a name, and then what their favorite hobbies are or something about them. Very common on websites. And so let's assume that your company employs 3 people. Well, if that's true, then doing this, the procedural approach, well, that's going to work just fine, because now you can go into here and you can say Mark, and you can say Janice, and you can say Hugh. So now we got our 3 employees here, and then of course, they need full names. So Mark Smith, Janice Doe, and Hugh Nguyen. I hope that's the correct spelling of that, but these are fictitious names. So now, okay, we got our elements. We see how they're all spaced out. And if we did want to fix that, we could set the min width property, and we'll say the min width is, let's say 300 pixels right there. And now we have a more consistent layout. So there's CSS in action. Okay, this is all good and well, but what if instead your boss says, okay, our company has 4,000 employees and we need you to make this. Would you really want to sit here and do this? And what if each of them has to be a different color? So now you're going to have .red, background color is red. So now div.red and some person. Well, now this is going to become very tedious very quickly. So what we need is we need a way to be able to generate a large amount of data very quickly. And so to get started with that, we're going to click on the JS icon here. We're going to turn on the Babble Preprocessor. Now what this means is that we want to use modern features of the web, and we want to make sure that they're going to work in any browser. If you're using Chrome like I am, most of this stuff actually works out the box, but for some browsers that's not true. Then what we want to do is we want to grab this URL, which is going to give us a library called Faker, and Faker just allows us to generate lots of fake data. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to save and close. And we're going to copy and paste some code. Now I'm going to try to walk you through it. Some of it's kind of complex, but the first thing we want to do is I'm going to grab and copy these 2 elements. You can go to this URL, by the way, and you'll be able to do this right along with me. So I paste those 2 in there, and what these 2 things do, I'm going to go ahead and minimize the CSS editor because we're pretty much done with that now. Pull this guy over. So we have const, and there are 2 basic types of declarations you can use. There's 3 in JavaScript. There is var, which equals variable, which means that we want this value to change over time. If it mutates, as it's called, and most programming is learning big names for simple concepts, but if it can change over time, then we're going to use the var keyword. Then we have the let keyword, which equals variable but within braces. So the var keyword is going to use what's called lexical scope, which means that if it's inside of a function, it's going to be scoped to that function. Let means you want to scope it within curly braces. If you're using ES6 or later, which we're using with Babble, then you're going to see let all the time. Var can cause a lot of weird side effects because it is very tricky and it's different than almost any other programming language. And then finally, we have const, and const means never let it change. And that is exactly what we want for this. So we have a function called hex to number, and that just means that inside of CSS, you have three ways of declaring colors. You can use a name. So whenever I said that something equals blue, that's a name. You have the ability to use RGB, so you can say RGB 255 like that. Or you have the ability to say, and it's not name equals blue. In this case, it's RGBA. You can say background color equals RGBA, or you can say background color equals pound 0F12, like that. And it's basically a hexadecimal number, so anything between 0 to the letter F, so A, B, C, D, E, F. And those will create your background colors. So this says if someone hands me this guy, I'm going to convert it into the number, which is going to be 255 times 255 times 255. So if I used all the values. So whatever that is, that's what I want back. This one's fairly complicated, so you can ignore it, but that's what it's going to do. It's going to convert this into that, basically. Then we have the isLight, and what that does, it says, okay, since we know that the values are 256 times 3, we're going to take that and we're going to ask something is light, so it's a light color, if that number is greater than this divided by 2. So if it's more than halfway bright, then we're going to consider it light. So pretty simple formula. And we're going to return true if whatever we get back isn't actually a number. We could try to convert it, but most likely it's going to be something like blue, or it's going to be an RGBA value. So those are our first two pieces of the puzzle there. Those are just some necessary setup. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to create our first class. So we talked about procedural code, and now we're going to dig into classes. So what a class does is a class is a way to create a block of code and then reuse it as many times as necessary. And that's exactly what we want. So the first thing with any class is you declare that it's a class, and then you give it a name. It can be any name, but the convention is uppercase like this versus the way you will see most things declared that are not classes, which will be like this, which is known as camel casing because it's got this little camel's hump. Next, we have a constructor, and a constructor says, when I declare a new version of this class, so new obj equals, let new obj equal new blue circle, whatever I put inside of here, which I don't have to put anything at all, but whatever I put inside of here, that's going to be set up inside of the constructor. And here I want my text for the names. So I'm creating a new blue circle, and it's going to create one of these guys. So then we have what happens. So the first thing is we're going to get a background color of aqua. Then we're going to query the document, which is this thing right here, and we're going to look for the body. Now it's not obvious, but if you right click and go to inspect, you'll see the body is this thing here. So that's the entire area that we're looking at. That's the body. Then we're going to create a new div element, so one of these guys there. And we're going to set the text content of this new div equal to whatever gets passed in right here through the constructor, so whatever they pass in right here. But that isn't going to quite finish it off. Our last step is going to be that we're going to create the element. And when we do, we're going to say whatever the background color is, that's going to be equal to aqua. So right here we've hard-coded it. And you'll hear people say don't hard-code values, and this is the reason why. Then we're going to make a text color of black, and we're going to see if the background color is light, or is dark, then we're going to set it equal to white. Otherwise, we're going to use the default black color. Then we're going to add the text color to the div, and then we're going to append that new div to the body. So in order to see this in action, I'm going to take Mark Smith here. Well, Looks like that didn't quite work, so I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. So I'm going to say new blue circle, Mark Smith, and then off of this, I'm going to create the element. And if everything worked, then we get a new Mark Smith element. And that's great because now I can create a Jane Smith element. And now she's going to appear right side of there. And this is all well and good, but the boss is going to come back and say, well, maybe we want different colors for these different things. How do we do that? Do we need to go into this blue circle and rewrite it? Well, no, we don't. What we need to do instead is we need to extend our class. So here I'm going to create a new class called AnyCircle. Paste that in there. And this new class will extend the blue circle. So that means whatever this blue circle is, I want to do the exact same thing, except I want to change certain things. And what I'm going to change is in the constructor. In addition to accepting text, I'm going to take a background color. So call the parent, which when you call super, that means do all this stuff. But in addition to that, set the background color equal to whatever they just passed in here. So notice that right here it was hard-coded. Now we're saying let the user pick what the background color is going to be. So now I'm going to create a new AnyCircle, and this will be Hugh Nguyen. Except for now, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a color, which in this case, let's say, this is going to be an ugly color, but 0ff dot create element. And if that works, well, we get almost the exact same color. So let's try this. Let's try, that's going to be pure white. We can see that our little text checker there works. So let's go now with pure black. All right, there we go. So now we can see Hue. And you saw there how easy it was to swap out the colors. Well, this is all still perfectly fine. And guess what? Now we don't even need this HTML we got going on right here. So let's click on this and let's go ahead and minimize that. Now we got nothing but JavaScript. So, okay, we've seen how to create a class. We've seen how to extend it and how we create new elements. But we want to create hundreds of elements. Well, how do we go about doing that? Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to skip over these things because these use the Faker library. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create array from. Let's even get rid of these guys here. This is going to say create an array, which will be 200 elements long. And then every single time for each of these 200 elements, create a new AnyCircle. Now we downloaded Faker, and Faker has a name property. And inside the name property, we have the ability to find a name. So that means create me some random name. Then I want to create some random color. And finally create it. And within 5 lines of code, we are able to create 200 different elements. And if we really wanted to go crazy, well, now we have our 2,000 elements. And you can see here that it would be a very long time of scrolling before you got to the end of this. So remember, if we did this by hand here, what we originally had in our procedural code, and you can see that every single time I change it, the colors update because this is all being generated randomly here. But if we had tried doing this with just raw HTML and CSS, we would have been here all day, and it would have been very tedious and painful to make a very simple correction. By using objects and by being able to extend them, we are able to create all sorts of new behavior. And of course, right now it's any circle, but I create any square, any rectangle. I could keep extending these different properties until I was able to create the elements that I wanted. And I could reuse all the code I'd already written. So notice that the blue circle has a lot more code than the AnyCircle, which only has a couple of lines of code. And that's one of the big benefits of classes. It enables you to inherit behavior. It enables you to change that behavior, or what's known as polymorphism. It enables you to encapsulate that behavior as well. So notice that each name and each color that we generate inside of this new AnyCircle does not interfere with anything else going on. Each of these colors is unique to each individual object. So we have some nice encapsulation as well. So that is the benefit of using classes and objects. And hopefully this sort of gives you an idea. Now here's a note about programming. If you want to become a good programmer, you're going to have to accept certain things on faith. You can't ask how everything works all at once, or you're just going to get overloaded and not be able to move forward. So the goal of a good trainer is to give you each bit of the puzzle and make it progressively more challenging, but never at a range where you feel lost. So this is just a brief introduction to classes. Coming up in future training, we're going to be digging at this from the ground up, all the way from procedural code to how to deal with classes and how to inherit and polymorph all different behavior. So I'll see you then.